Crowds filled the squares of Accra, Ghana on April 30th, 2025. Red, yellow, and green flags waved beneath the African sky as thousands marched in support of Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré. He was facing a coup attempt that shook his own country and reverberated around the world. Among the protesters, Ralph St. Williams walked with steady steps, his gaze fixed on the signs held by the people. His presence there was no accident. "They're trying to silence him," Ralph said into the microphone, his voice echoing across the square. "But they won't succeed. Today, we are here not only for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa." Beside him, Kwame Nkrumah Jr., an experienced journalist, recorded everything on his phone. "Are you sure about this?" Kwame asked hesitantly. "This live stream could be dangerous, Ralph." Ralph simply smiled. "Silence is more dangerous." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré watched footage of the global demonstrations from his private room. His eyes reflected exhaustion, but also a flicker of hope. "They came for us," he murmured to himself. Beside him, Amina Diallo, a Burkinabe activist and organizer of the protests, nodded. "The world is watching, Mr. President. They know our fight isn't just political, it's existential. Yet not everything was harmonious." Behind the scenes, critical voices began to rise. Some accused Ralph of opportunism, claiming he was using the situation to gain fame. Others questioned whether such a display of solidarity would be enough to change the course of events in Burkina Faso. It was in this climate of growing tension that Ralph decided to do something unexpected: record a direct message to President Traoré. Kwame, initially skeptical, started to grasp the impact of Ralph's words. "Maybe you're right," he said, "but this will put you at the center of it all. Are you ready for that?" Ralph took a deep breath. "It doesn't matter what happens to me. What matters is that the world sees we are united." In Paris, London, and New York, the demonstrations were gaining momentum. People from different backgrounds and cultures marched together, holding signs with messages like "Free Africa" and "Burkinabe Resistance." Social media buzzed with videos and photos from these rallies, creating a global wave of support. As night fell over Accra, Ralph finally decided to record his message. He knew this act could change everything. As he adjusted the camera, his heart pounded. He was about to connect with someone he had never met in person, but whose struggle he felt deeply as his own. That night, Ralph sat in front of the camera in his small apartment in Accra. The air was heavy, charged with emotion and expectation. He adjusted the lighting before beginning, his serious face contrasting with the soft glow of the screen. "President Traoré," he began, his voice firm, "I know you are fighting against both external and internal forces, but know that the African people stand with you." At the same time, in Paris, London, and New York, people were watching the live stream. Some cried, others raised their fists in support. However, critics began attacking Ralph on social media. "You know nothing about international politics," wrote an anonymous commenter. To Ralph, those words felt like sharp knives, but he knew he could not back down now. Ibrahim Traoré, on the other hand, was isolated in his office, surrounded by aides trying to manage the crisis. When his team showed him Ralph's live stream, he remained silent for a few minutes. Then he did something surprising. He dialed the phone number displayed on the screen. "Hello?" Ralph's voice echoed through the line. "Mr. Williams?" Ralph couldn't believe what was happening. The unexpected call from Ibrahim Traoré had turned his live stream into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. "Mr. President," said Ralph, trying to keep his composure, "you don't know how much this means to me, to all of us." On the other end of the line, Ibrahim sounded calm, but his words carried the weight of someone fighting for something far greater than himself. Meanwhile, Kwame Nkrumah Jr., who was recording everything on his phone, could barely contain his emotions. He realized that this moment was historic, one that would go down in the books as a milestone in African solidarity. "This is going to go viral," he whispered, almost to himself. But Ralph interrupted him. "It's not about going viral, Kwame. It's about connecting people." In Johannesburg, some demonstrations had been violently suppressed by local authorities. This cast a shadow over the global movement, prompting Ralph and Ibrahim to reflect on the risks involved in continuing their struggle. "We are on a path with no turning back," Ralph said after hanging up the phone. Ralph St. Williams couldn't believe what was happening. The unexpected call from Ibrahim Traoré had turned his live stream into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. "Mr. President," said Ralph, trying to keep his composure, "you don't know how much this means to me, to all of us." On the other end of the line, Ibrahim sounded calm, but his words carried the weight of someone fighting for something far greater than himself. Meanwhile, Kwame Nkrumah Jr., who was recording everything on his phone, could barely contain his emotions. He realized that this moment was historic, one that would go down in the books as a milestone in African solidarity. "This is going to go viral," he whispered, almost to himself. But Ralph interrupted him. "It's not about going viral, Kwame. It's about connecting people." In Ouagadougou, Amina Diallo watched the scene unfold on a monitor shared by Traoré's aides. She felt a chill run down her spine upon hearing the president's words. "Our fight is not just for Burkina Faso," he said clearly. "It's for Africa, for dignity, for the memory of our ancestors." Those words resonated deeply with Amina, who had dedicated years of her life to the cause of African sovereignty. However, not everything was harmonious. In Johannesburg, news began to arrive of demonstrations violently suppressed by local authorities. Some activists were arrested, others injured. This cast a shadow over the global movement, prompting Ralph and Ibrahim to reflect on the risks involved in continuing their struggle. "We are on a path with no turning back," Ralph said after hanging up the phone. Kwame, still moved by what he had witnessed, decided to write an article about the moment. He knew it could inspire others to join the cause. Meanwhile, Amina was organizing new demonstrations, determined to keep the flame alive. "We can't give up now," she repeated to her fellow activists. The conversation between Ralph and Ibrahim lasted only a few minutes, but left deep marks on both men. For Ralph, it was a reminder that his voice held power. For Ibrahim, it was confirmation that he was not alone. They were two men from different generations, united by a shared vision, a better future for Africa. After the call ended, Ralph sat in silence, reflecting on what had happened. He knew this moment would change his life forever, and as images of the global protests continued to circulate on social media, he realized the world was watching and waiting. In the days that followed, the impact of the live stream and Ibrahim Traoré's call was overwhelming. Social media exploded with hashtags like United Africa and Burkinabe Resistance. Young people from all over the world began mobilizing, organizing peaceful protests and online discussions about the importance of African sovereignty. Ralph watched it all unfold with a mix of pride and concern. "What we're doing is dangerous," he told Kwame during an impromptu interview in his apartment. "But it's also necessary." Kwame nodded, adding, "You're giving voice to those who have none. That's powerful." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim faced increasing pressure. His political opponents tried to discredit him, accusing him of provoking international conflicts. Amina, on the other hand, worked tirelessly to ensure the demonstrations remained peaceful. She knew any act of violence could be used against them. "We need to show the world that our fight is just," she kept repeating. Her dedication inspired many, but also put her at risk. In Paris, a crowd gathered in front of the Eiffel Tower, holding signs showing support for Burkina Faso. Among them was a young student named Sophie, who had never been interested in politics. Until she watched Ralph's live stream, "It made me realize how connected the world really is," she told a local reporter. Meanwhile, in New York, activists were organizing a march to the United Nations headquarters, demanding that the international community recognize Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Ralph followed everything from afar, moved by the impact his message had created. Ibrahim, for his part, remained firm in his stance. He knew the future of his country depended on it. During a press conference, he declared, "If we fall together. But if we resist as one." His words echoed around the world, strengthening the movement even further. By the end of the week, Ralph received a message from Amina. "You've done the impossible. Now it's our turn to keep going." He smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. The following weeks were marked by renewed energy in the streets. In Accra, Ralph St. Williams became a central figure in the global movement. He spent hours in meetings with local activists, discussing strategies to keep pressure on Western governments. "We can't let this become just a trend," he often said. Kwame Nkrumah Jr., always by Ralph's side, published his article about the call between Ralph and Ibrahim. The piece gained international attention, further amplifying their message. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, Amina Diallo faced mounting challenges. Some of her fellow activists had been detained, and she feared for everyone's safety. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré remained steadfast, but the weight of leadership was beginning to show on his tired face. During a private conversation with Amina, he admitted, "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough." She responded firmly, "You are the hope of millions. You can't give up now." In Johannesburg, the peaceful demonstrations began to bear fruit. Local authorities released some of the detained activists, yielding to international pressure. This brought momentary relief, but also reminded everyone of the importance of maintaining mobilization. In Paris, Sophie, the young student inspired by Ralph, organized a university event to discuss the situation in Burkina Faso. "We need to understand what's happening there," she told the audience, "because it affects all of us." Her initiative was soon replicated in other European cities. Meanwhile, Ralph reflected on the impact of his words. He knew his position was delicate, but he also realized he had never been closer to sparking real change. "Maybe this is what it means to be a leader," he thought to himself. By the end of the month, an open letter signed by Ralph, Ibrahim, and Amina was published in global newspapers. They called on African nations to unite in defense of their sovereignty. The message was clear. We will no longer accept foreign interference. Our destiny is in our own hands. The following months brought significant changes. Although Burkina Faso still faced challenges, international pressure forced a diplomatic re-engagement. The coup attempt was officially condemned by several nations, and Ibrahim Traoré received support from African leaders. Ralph St. Williams, in turn, became an unavoidable voice in global political discourse. He traveled to several countries, participating in conferences and lectures. During one of them, he declared, "What we did was not just support a president. It was to remind the world that Africa has a voice." Amina Diallo continued her work as an activist, but now with more resources and visibility. She founded an organization to support young African leaders, ensuring that the flame of resistance remained alive. "Our future depends on it," she said during its inauguration. Kwame Nkrumah Jr. published a book based on the events titled The Flame of Resistance. The book was critically acclaimed and helped further solidify the movement's legacy. He dedicated the work to Ralph, Ibrahim, and Amina, calling them the silent heroes of our time. In New York, the march to the UN resulted in a symbolic resolution recognizing the importance of African sovereignty. While only a gesture, it represented an important step toward changing the global narrative about Africa. Ibrahim Traoré, in an emotional speech, thanked everyone who had stood by his side. "You showed me that we are not alone," he said. "Together, we proved that Africa can decide its own destiny." In the end, Ralph met with Kwame again in Accra. Both looked at the horizon, reflecting on everything that had happened. "Our fight is not over," Ralph said, "but we took the first step, and that, in itself, is something."